A CEO is shocked to see a stranger nursing his daughter, but the truth is that she's something he never saw coming. He walks into his home after a long trip and freezes. A woman he has never met is holding his sick little girl, comforting her like she's known her forever. At first, he thinks it's a break-in, or something even worse, but then the stranger looks up and says 4 words that flip his entire world upside down. She is my baby. Suddenly, this isn't just a mystery. It's a battle for truth, safety, and a past full of dark secrets. Because someone dangerous is searching for the stranger, and now they know where the child is too. So who is this woman? Why does the child reach for her like she's family? And what will this CEO do when the truth threatens to destroy everything he thought he knew? Will he fight for the truth, or lose the 2 people who could save his life? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Thomas Ward's mansion as he pulled into the circular driveway. His shoulders felt heavy with exhaustion, and the sudden cancellation of the investor summit left him irritated. At least he could look forward to seeing Ava, his bright-eyed 2-year-old daughter, whose squeals of delight usually greeted him at the door. He loosened his tie as he entered the quiet foyer, noting the unusual stillness. "Ava?" he called out, his voice echoing off the marble floors. No pitter-patter of tiny feet answered him. A frown creased his forehead as he set down his briefcase. That's when he heard it, soft humming floating down from the 2nd floor. The melody was unfamiliar, but soothing, coming from the direction of Ava's nursery. Thomas's heart rate quickened. Mrs. Peterson, Ava's nanny, never sang or hummed. Taking the stairs 2 at a time, he followed the sound. The nursery door stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. As he pushed it open, the scene before him stopped him cold in his tracks. A young black woman sat in the cushioned rocking chair by the window, cradling Ava against her chest. His daughter's usually rosy cheeks were flushed with fever, her dark curls damp with sweat. The stranger's arms held Ava with such natural grace, such inherent gentleness, that for a moment Thomas could only stare. The woman looked up, her deep brown eyes meeting his without surprise or guilt. There was something in her gaze, a quiet strength, a profound sadness, that made his fingers pause before reaching for his phone to call security. "Mr. Ward," she said softly, continuing to rock Ava. "I'm Amanda Brooks." Her voice was steady despite the tension evident in her shoulders. "Your daughter has a fever of 103.5 degrees. I found her alone, crying in her crib about an hour ago." Thomas's mind raced. Mrs. Peterson should have been here. Where was she? And how had this woman gotten past his security system? Yet he couldn't ignore how Ava seemed perfectly content in Amanda's arms, her small body relaxed despite the fever that clearly plagued her. "I've given her children's fever reducer and have been keeping her hydrated," Amanda continued, her hand moving in small circles on Ava's back. "She's starting to cool down now." Thomas took a step forward, his protective instincts warring with the obvious care this stranger was showing his daughter. "Who are you?" he demanded, though his voice came out softer than intended. "How did you get in here?" Amanda's eyes never left his face as she adjusted Ava's position slightly. His daughter made a small sound of protest, but then settled again, her tiny fingers curled into Amanda's simple blue blouse. The tenderness in that moment struck Thomas deeply, reminding him of something he couldn't quite place. "Mr. Ward," Amanda began, her voice trembling slightly for the first time. "What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear, but you need to know the truth about Ava." She took a deep breath, her arms tightening protectively around his daughter. and about how she came to be yours. Thomas felt his world tilt slightly. There was something in Amanda's expression, a mix of pain, determination, and what looked like love as she gazed down at Ava, that made his stomach clench. He moved closer, drawn by an inexplicable need to hear what this woman had to say, even as part of him wanted to snatch Ava away and call the police. The late afternoon light caught the tears gathering in Amanda's eyes, though none fell. She looked down at Ava's sleeping face, then back at Thomas. The weight of unspoken words hung heavy in the air between them. "Please," he said, his voice rough with emotion he didn't quite understand. "Who are you?" Amanda's fingers gently smoothed Ava's damp curls. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper, but each word carried the force of a thunderclap in the quiet nursery. "I'm the woman whose baby was stolen from her 2 years ago. I'm the mother who was told her newborn died." She swallowed hard, her composure cracking slightly. "I'm Ava's biological mother." Thomas's legs felt unsteady beneath him as he sank into the cushioned window seat across from Amanda. Her words echoed in his mind, impossible yet delivered with such raw conviction that he couldn't simply dismiss them. "That's—" he began, then stopped, watching how Ava's small hand clutched Amanda's blouse. "That's not possible. We adopted Ava through a private agency. Everything was legal, documented." Amanda's eyes held a deep sadness as she continued to rock slowly. 3 years ago, I escaped from a trafficking ring in Atlanta," she said, her voice steady despite the horror of her words. "I was 8 months pregnant. The people who helped me hid me in a shelter, but when I went into labor," she drew a shaking breath, "they told me my baby died during delivery. I never even got to hold her." Thomas studied her face, noting for the first time the similarities between this stranger and his daughter. The same delicate arch of the eyebrows, the identical curve of their lips. His heart began to pound harder. "I tried to move on with my life," Amanda continued. "I got a job, went back to school, then last month I saw her face." She met Thomas's gaze. "Your divorce was in the news. There was a photo of you leaving the courthouse with Ava. I knew immediately. She looks exactly like my mother did in old photos. The same dimple when she smiles, the same curls." Ava stirred in Amanda's arms, her fever-flushed face turning towards her chest. "Mama," she murmured sleepily, snuggling closer. The word hit Thomas like a physical blow. Ava had never called Grace Mama, despite all their attempts to encourage it. Yet here she was, using the word so naturally with a complete stranger. "I hired a private investigator," Amanda said softly, her hand moving in gentle circles on Ava's back. "He traced the adoption back to Grace's connection with someone named Jennifer Voss. She runs an illegal adoption network, Mr. Ward. She works with trafficking rings, selling babies to wealthy families who don't want to wait through normal channels." Thomas stood abruptly, pacing the length of the nursery. His mind raced through memories of the adoption process. Grace had handled everything. She'd come home one day, excited about a friend who knew of a pregnant woman wanting to give up her baby. The paperwork had seemed legitimate, but he'd been so busy with the company's expansion. "I have proof," Amanda said, reaching carefully into her bag while maintaining her hold on Ava. She withdrew a folder and held it out to him. "Medical records from the shelter. DNA test results comparing my profile to a sample from Ava's discarded juice box. Police reports from when I escaped. News articles about Jennifer Voss's suspected trafficking connections." Thomas took the folder with trembling hands. The documents inside were devastating in their authenticity. Hospital photos of a pregnant Amanda, police statements, DNA results showing a 99.9% probability of maternal relation. He pressed the intercom button on the wall. "Miles, come to the nursery, now." Within moments, his head of security appeared in the doorway, hand instinctively moving toward his concealed weapon when he saw Amanda. Thomas shook his head slightly, and Miles relaxed his stance, though his eyes remained alert. "I need you to verify these," Thomas said, handing Miles the folder. "Everything. Her identity, the shelter records, the police reports. Call every contact you have. I want to know if this is real within the hour." Miles glanced between Thomas and Amanda, then at Ava sleeping peacefully in the stranger's arms. His expression softened slightly as he noted how naturally the child rested against her. "Yes, sir, I'll handle it personally." After Miles left, silence filled the nursery. Thomas watched Amanda continue to rock his daughter, possibly their daughter, his world tilting on its axis. Everything he thought he knew about his family, about Grace, about the adoption that had brought such joy to his life, was crumbling around him. "She recognized me," Amanda whispered, more to herself than to Thomas. "The moment I walked into this room, she reached for me." She knew. Tears finally spilled onto her cheeks. "I thought she was dead. For 2 years, I thought my baby was dead." Thomas moved closer, drawn by the raw pain in her voice. He could see Ava's chest rising and falling in the peaceful rhythm of sleep, her fever finally breaking under Amanda's careful attention. The tenderness between them was undeniable, as was the physical resemblance that seemed more striking with each passing moment. "You can stay," he found himself saying, surprising them both. "Until we verify everything, you can stay with her." Amanda looked up at him, gratitude and relief washing over her features. "Thank you," she breathed. I'm not here to disrupt your life, Mr. Ward. I just needed to know she was alive, to see her happy and safe." But Thomas barely heard her words. His mind was already racing ahead, thinking of Grace, of the adoption, of all the questions he should have asked. He watched Amanda press a gentle kiss to Ava's forehead, the gesture so natural it made his chest ache. Everything he believed about his family had just been thrown into question. As the evening light faded outside the nursery windows, Thomas Ward stood in silent witness to a reunion he never could have imagined, waiting for Miles to confirm what his heart was already beginning to accept: that the woman rocking his daughter to sleep was telling the truth, and nothing in his life would ever be the same. The first rays of dawn crept through the window of Thomas Ward's home office, where he had spent most of the night reviewing documents and making calls. His usually pristine desk was cluttered with papers, adoption records, police reports, and the folder Amanda had given him. Dark circles shadowed his eyes as he pushed back from his desk, his expensive chair creaking in protest. The aroma of coffee drifted up from the kitchen below. Thomas paused at the top of the stairs, listening to the soft melody of "Amazing Grace" floating through the morning air. Amanda's voice was gentle, meant only for Ava's ears, but it carried an underlying strength that made his chest tighten. He descended the stairs slowly, each step measured and hesitant. The scene that greeted him in his kitchen stopped him in his tracks. Amanda sat at the breakfast nook, spooning oatmeal into Ava's waiting mouth. His daughter was still in her pink butterfly pajamas, dark curls wild from sleep, giggling as Amanda made quiet airplane noises with each spoonful. "Good morning, Mr. Ward," Amanda said, not looking up from her task. Her voice carried the same steady calm as the night before, but Thomas noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she reached for a napkin to wipe Ava's chin. "Morning," he managed, moving to the coffee maker. The routine of preparing his morning coffee gave him something to focus on besides the domestic scene playing out behind him. Did you sleep at all?" Amanda's soft laugh held little humor. "Not much, but I'm used to that." She paused, then added quietly, I spent a lot of sleepless nights wondering where she was, if she was safe, if she was loved. Thomas turned, leaning against the counter with his coffee cup gripped too tightly. Tell me, he said, the words coming out more like a plea than a command. Tell me everything. Amanda took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving Ava as she continued feeding her. After I escaped, I was placed in a shelter for trafficking survivors. I was 7 months pregnant, terrified, and convinced they would find me. She wiped a bit of oatmeal from Ava's cheek. When I went into labor, there were complications. I passed out from blood loss, and when I woke up, her voice cracked slightly. They told me my baby didn't make it. Ava reached for Amanda's face, as if sensing her distress. Mama sad? The toddler asked, her small hand patting Amanda's cheek. The simple gesture brought fresh tears to Amanda's eyes. No, baby. Mama's okay now, she whispered, pressing a kiss to Ava's palm. Thomas watched the interaction, his coffee growing cold in his hands. The love between them was undeniable, raw and pure in a way that made his throat tight. A woman named Sarah Martinez. She works with trafficking survivors. She helped me start investigating last year. Amanda continued, her voice stronger now. The hospital records didn't add up. There was no death certificate. The doctor listed on my delivery records didn't exist. She finally looked up at Thomas. Then 3 months ago, I saw the article about your divorce. There was a photo of you with Ava at a charity event. I knew the moment I saw her face. The kitchen fell silent, except for the soft clink of Ava's spoon against her bowl. Thomas set his coffee down, running a hand over his face. Grace handled everything, he said, more to himself than Amanda. She said it was a private adoption, that the mother was a friend of a friend who wanted to remain anonymous. The paperwork looked legitimate. I never questioned. Jennifer Voss, Amanda said, the name coming out like a prayer for strength. She's the connection. Sarah found evidence linking her to similar cases. Babies sold to wealthy families, paperwork falsified, biological mothers told their children died. Her hands were shaking more now, but her voice remained steady. I'm not here to cause trouble, Mr. Ward. I had to know she was alive. I had to see her face. The intercom buzzed, making them both jump. Miles's voice came through, professional but urgent. Sir, I have preliminary findings. You'll want to see this. Thomas pressed the button. Come to the kitchen. Miles entered moments later, his usually impeccable appearance showing signs of an all-night investigation. He nodded respectfully to Amanda before turning to Thomas. The DNA results are legitimate, sir. I've verified them through 3 separate labs. The police reports match records from both the department and the shelter. And he hesitated, glancing at Amanda. We found 4 other cases with similar patterns, all involving Jennifer Voss and all connected to private adoptions arranged by Mrs. Ward. Thomas gripped the counter behind him, his knuckles white. The weight of this truth, that his ex-wife had knowingly participated in human trafficking, that his beloved daughter had been stolen from a mother who nearly died bringing her into the world, threatened to bring him to his knees. Dada? Ava's voice cut through his thoughts. She was looking at him with concern, her little brow furrowed. Dada sad too? He moved to the breakfast nook, kneeling beside her chair. No, sweetheart. Daddy's just thinking. He brushed a curl from her forehead, noting how her fever had completely broken under Amanda's care. Mr. Ward? Amanda began, her calm facade finally cracking. Fear crept into her voice as she gripped her hands together in her lap. Please don't send us away. I know this is impossible. I know it's asking too much, but... Tears spilled down her cheeks. She's my baby. I never stopped loving her, never stopped praying for her. Thomas looked at Miles, who gave a slight nod. She's clean, sir. No criminal record, no suspicious connections. Everything in her story checks out. After a long moment, Thomas stood. You can stay. Another night, at least. Until we know what to do. The relief that flooded Amanda's face was almost painful to witness. Thank you, she whispered, quickly wiping away her tears. She turned back to Ava, who was reaching for another spoonful of oatmeal. Would you like me to sing again, sweet girl? Ava nodded enthusiastically, and Amanda's voice filled the kitchen once more, this time with This Little Light of Mine. Thomas watched them for a moment longer before retreating to his office, Miles following close behind. That evening, Thomas stood in the hallway outside Ava's nursery. Amanda's voice drifted through the partially open door as she prayed over their sleeping daughter. Lord, keep her safe, Amanda whispered. Protect her heart, guide her steps. Thank you for letting me find her. Thank you for this miracle I never dared to hope for. Thomas leaned against the wall, letting her words wash over him. In less than 24 hours, his world had been turned upside down. Yet listening to Amanda's prayer, filled with such genuine love and gratitude, he couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, this impossible situation was exactly where they all needed to be. The autumn sun hung low in the afternoon sky as Thomas paced his office, phone pressed to his ear. Each ring seemed to stretch longer than the last until finally, Grace's voice came through. Thomas, this is unexpected. Her tone was carefully neutral, but he could hear the underlying tension. We need to talk about Ava's adoption. Thomas kept his voice steady despite the anger churning inside him. I need the truth, Grace, all of it. There was a pause, then a nervous laugh. What do you mean? We went through perfect promise adoptions, everything was completely legal. Stop! Thomas cut her off. Amanda Brooks is here. The sharp intake of breath on the other end told him everything. I don't know who that is. Don't lie to me. Thomas's voice rose sharply. He forced himself to take a deep breath, conscious of how sound carried in the mansion. Jennifer Voss, the fake paperwork, the trafficking ring. Did you know what you were really doing when you arranged this? Grace's voice trembled. It wasn't like that. Jennifer assured me everything was legitimate. She said the mother wanted privacy, wanted a better life for her baby. She trailed off, the excuse sounding hollow even to her own ears. The mother nearly died giving birth. They told her our daughter was dead. Thomas's words came out like ice. How much did you pay them, Grace? Only silence answered him. How much? $200,000. Grace whispered. But Thomas, I swear I didn't know. I was desperate. After the miscarriages, I wanted to give you a family. Thomas closed his eyes, fighting back waves of nausea. You bought a stolen child. Please, Thomas, I'll make it right. I'll call my lawyers. He ended the call, unable to listen to any more excuses. Through his office window, he could see into the garden where Amanda sat with Ava on a blanket, surrounded by fallen leaves. Mrs. Chen, his longtime housekeeper, approached them with a tray of apple slices and milk. Thomas watched as Mrs. Chen settled beside them, her usually reserved demeanor softening as she watched Amanda help Ava arrange leaves by color. The 3-year-old was completely at ease, leaning back against Amanda as if she'd always belonged there. Beautiful sight, isn't it? Miles spoke from the doorway, making Thomas start slightly. What have you found? Thomas asked, turning away from the window. Mrs. Chen reports that Ava hasn't had a single tantrum since Amanda arrived, usually has at least 2 or 3 by now. Miles stepped further into the office. Cook says the same. Ava's eating better than she has in months. Even finished her vegetables at lunch. Thomas nodded, remembering the constant battles over food. And the security sweep? Everything's clean. No suspicious vehicles or persons in the area. Miles hesitated. Sir, about Ms. Brooks. Her story checks out completely. The hospital records, the police reports, even her DNA. She's not lying about any of it. The sound of laughter drew Thomas's attention back to the window. Ava had dumped a handful of leaves over Amanda's head, and both were giggling as Mrs. Chen helped brush them away. The scene stirred something in his chest, a warmth he hadn't felt since before Grace left. Hours later, after Ava had been tucked in for the night, Thomas found Amanda in the family room. She sat in the window seat, gazing out at the darkened garden. She started walking at 11 months. Amanda said softly as he approached. At least that's what her developmental records show. Thomas settled into a nearby armchair. 10.5, actually. She was so determined, kept pulling herself up on the coffee table until one day she just let go and took off. Amanda smiled, though her eyes glistened with tears. I used to imagine her first steps, her first words. I'd dream about them in the shelter, trying to picture what she might look like. She turned to face him. Thank you for taking such good care of her. Before Thomas could respond, a harsh electronic wail cut through the quiet house. The security alarms were screaming. Stay here, Thomas ordered, but Amanda was already on her feet, following him to the security room where Miles was reviewing the cameras. There. Miles pointed to one of the screens. A figure in dark clothing had just left something on the back porch before disappearing into the woods behind the property. Is it? Amanda's voice shook. Let's find out. Thomas led the way downstairs, Miles close behind them with his hand on his weapon. The note sat innocently on the welcome mat, weighted down by a small stone. Thomas pulled on a latex glove from the security kit by the door before picking it up. The message was typed in plain black letters. Return what belongs to us. Thomas turned to Amanda, seeing his own fear reflected in her eyes. The trafficking ring had found her. Found them. And they wanted Ava back. Amanda's hands flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. The simple peace they'd found over the past day and a half shattered like glass, leaving only sharp edges and rising panic. Miles. Thomas's voice was deadly calm. Lock down the house. Call in the backup team. No one gets near Ava's room. The head of security was already moving, speaking rapidly into his radio as he initiated emergency protocols. But Thomas barely heard him. His focus was entirely on Amanda, who stood trembling before him, arms wrapped tightly around herself as if trying to hold herself together. In that moment, Thomas realized with crystal clarity that he wasn't just protecting his daughter anymore. Amanda, this gentle, strong woman who had survived hell to find her child, was now under his protection too. And he would die before he let anyone hurt either of them. The security alarms continued their piercing wail as Miles moved through the mansion with practiced efficiency, directing his team through his earpiece. Alpha team, secure the perimeter. Beta team, I want eyes on every approach. Nobody gets within 100 yards of this house. Thomas guided Amanda back inside, his hand steady at her elbow. Her whole body trembled, but her first words were about Ava. We need to check on her, she whispered urgently. Mrs. Chen is with her, Thomas assured her, but led the way upstairs anyway. They found Ava still sleeping soundly, her small chest rising and falling peacefully. Mrs. Chen stood guard by the window, curtains drawn tight. Take them to the safe room, Miles instructed, appearing in the doorway. I'll have the team sweep the grounds again. Thomas nodded, gathering the sleeping Ava, while Amanda quickly packed a small bag with necessities. The safe room was a fortified space in the basement, equipped with everything needed for an extended stay. As the heavy door sealed behind them, Thomas laid Ava gently on the small bed. "Now," he said, turning to Amanda, "I need to know everything." Amanda sank into one of the chairs, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "The Silver Chain Syndicate," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's what they call themselves. They don't just traffic people. They're involved in illegal medical research, organ trading, experimental treatments." She drew a shaky breath. "When they discovered I was pregnant, everything changed. They ran tests, kept me isolated. I heard them talking about genetic markers, about how valuable the baby would be." Thomas sat across from her, his expression grave. "What kind of genetic markers?" "Something rare, something they could use in their research." Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't understand all of it, but I knew I had to get out. I escaped when I was 8 months pregnant, but they found me at the hospital after I gave birth. They told me—" Her voice broke. "They told me my baby died. I believed them for 3 years. Until you saw Ava's picture." Thomas finished quietly. Amanda nodded, wiping her eyes. "At first I thought I was imagining things, but then I started digging, working with a survivor advocate. We found patterns, connections. The private adoption agency Grace used, it was a front for Silverchain. And now they're back," Thomas stated, his jaw clenching. "They started leaving messages a month ago, at my apartment, my workplace, my church." Amanda's hands shook as she hugged herself. "I've been running, staying with different safe houses, but they always find me. When I finally confirmed Ava was here—" She looked at her sleeping daughter. "I had to come. I had to make sure she was safe." Thomas stood, pacing the confined space. The logical part of his brain was already calculating risks, resources, legal angles. But something deeper was driving him now, an instinct he hadn't known he possessed. "They won't touch her," he declared, his voice hard with conviction. "Either of you. I'll call in every favor, use every resource I have. The Silver Chain Syndicate isn't going to hurt my family." Amanda looked up at him, startled by the word family and the fierce protection in his voice. Thomas himself seemed surprised by the intensity of his declaration. Miles's voice came through the intercom, making them both jump. "Perimeter is secure, sir. No signs of additional intruders, but we are maintaining high alert. I've contacted local law enforcement and our private security contractors." "Good," Thomas responded. "Keep me updated." The hours crawled by. They took turns watching over Ava, who miraculously slept through most of the night, only waking once for water and cuddles before drifting off again in Amanda's arms. Thomas observed them in the dim light of the safe room. Amanda's head had finally drooped against the wall, exhaustion winning out over fear. Ava was curled against her chest, one small hand gripping Amanda's shirt, even in sleep. They looked peaceful despite the circumstances, like two pieces of a puzzle finally fitted together. Moving quietly, Thomas retrieved a soft blanket from the storage cabinet. As he draped it over them, careful not to disturb their rest, he was struck by how natural it felt. This instinct to protect and care for them both. The fierce determination he'd expressed earlier hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown stronger as he watched them sleep. For years, Thomas had built his life around logic and control. Emotions were messy, unpredictable things that got in the way of clear thinking. But now, watching Amanda and Ava, he realized some things transcended logic. The need to keep them safe, to preserve the gentle bond between mother and daughter, to fight against the evil threatening them. These weren't logical decisions. They came from somewhere deeper, somewhere he thought he'd locked away long ago. The first light of dawn began to filter through the narrow window near the ceiling. Amanda shifted slightly in her sleep, drawing Ava closer. Thomas adjusted the blanket around their shoulders, his touch gentle, protective. In the quiet of that moment, as morning crept into the safe room, he accepted what his heart had already decided. These two souls were now under his protection, and he would move heaven and earth to keep them safe. The morning sun cast long shadows across the mansion's marble floors as Thomas made his way to the kitchen. The events of the previous night still felt surreal, like a dream he couldn't quite shake. He found Amanda already there, carefully measuring coffee grounds while Ava sat in her high chair, contentedly munching on banana slices. "Good morning," Amanda said softly, her eyes tired but alert. She'd changed into fresh clothes that Thomas's housekeeper had provided, simple jeans and a powder blue sweater that made her look younger, more vulnerable. "Morning." Thomas cleared his throat. "I've spoken with Miles. We're implementing full security protocols. No one enters or leaves without clearance. You'll both stay here until we sort this out." Amanda nodded, relief visible in the slight drop of her shoulders. "Thank you. I know this isn't ideal. It's necessary," Thomas replied firmly. He watched as she poured 3 cups of coffee, automatically adding cream to his, something she must have noticed yesterday. The small gesture struck him, how quickly she picked up on details. The day settled into what would become their new routine. Thomas converted the library into a temporary office, conducting video meetings while keeping one eye on the security feeds. Through his open door, he could hear Ava's delighted squeals from the family room, where Amanda had created an impromptu storytime corner with cushions and blankets. During a break between calls, Thomas found himself drawn to observe them. Amanda sat cross-legged on the floor, reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar with animated expressions that had Ava completely captivated. Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper who had worked for Thomas for 5 years and rarely showed emotion, stood nearby with a tender smile as she folded laundry. "She has such a way with children," Mrs. Chen commented quietly when she noticed Thomas. "This morning, she helped me calm my grandson over FaceTime when he was having a tantrum. Just started singing this sweet little song, and before you know it, he was giggling." Thomas nodded, noting how Amanda's entire being seemed to light up when she made Ava laugh. It was so different from Grace's careful, distant parenting style. Throughout the day, small moments caught his attention. Amanda saying grace before Ava's lunch, her eyes closed in genuine prayer. The gentle way she thanked the security staff, remembering each of their names. How she organized Ava's toys while singing hymns under her breath, her voice carrying peace even in their tense situation. By late afternoon, Thomas had to admit that the mansion felt different. Warmer somehow, despite the heavy security presence. He found himself lingering in common areas, his laptop forgotten, as he watched Amanda and Ava build block towers or draw pictures with chunky crayons. "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes, Mrs. Chen announced, poking her head into the family room where they had all gravitated. The savory smell of pot roast filled the air. "Thank you," Amanda smiled. "Ava, should we clean up these crayons before dinner?" "No clean," Ava declared, but she was already helping Amanda gather the crayons, their teamwork clearly a familiar dance, despite knowing each other only 2 days. Thomas felt something shift in his chest watching them. The scene was so domestic, so natural. Amanda caught his eye and offered a small smile, which he found himself returning before he could think better of it. At the dinner table, Amanda cut Ava's food into perfect bite-sized pieces while maintaining a steady stream of conversation that kept the toddler engaged. "The green beans are having a party with the carrots," she explained seriously, arranging the vegetables into a smiley face that made Ava giggle. "More party!" Ava demanded, bouncing in her booster seat. Amanda's face lit up with mischief. She began to sing, her voice sweet and clear. 5 little peas in a pea pod pressed, 1 grew, 2 grew, and so did all the rest. She accompanied each number with a little bounce that had Ava shrieking with laughter. Thomas found himself transfixed. The simple joy on both their faces pierced something in him he'd thought long buried. When was the last time he'd heard such uninhibited happiness in this house? When was the last time he'd felt this kind of peace? The lullaby shifted into another song about dancing vegetables, and Ava's giggles grew more intense. Even the security guard by the door was fighting a smile. Thomas realized he was grinning too, his food forgotten as he watched them. Amanda caught his eye again, and this time her smile held something more. Gratitude, perhaps, or understanding. In that moment, Thomas recognized a startling truth. He trusted her, not just with Ava, though that trust was profound enough to shake him. He trusted her presence in his home, her gentle influence on his staff, her quiet strength in the face of danger. It was illogical, this trust in someone he'd known for barely 48 hours, someone whose appearance had upended his entire world. Yet watching her now, her head bent close to Ava's as they shared some private joke, Thomas couldn't find it in himself to doubt her. The warmth in his chest expanded, unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. "More sing?" Ava demanded, and Amanda obliged with another verse about dancing carrots. Their laughter filled the dining room, chasing away the shadows of fear that had haunted them since the previous night's threat. Thomas sat back in his chair, letting the moment wash over him, aware that something fundamental had shifted in his carefully ordered world, and finding, to his surprise, that he didn't mind at all. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows as Amanda stirred honey into her tea. Thomas sat across from her at the breakfast nook, his coffee untouched. The house was quiet, Ava still asleep upstairs, the staff giving them privacy for what they both knew would be a difficult conversation. Amanda wrapped her hands around the warm mug, drawing strength from its warmth. "I grew up in Charleston," she began softly. "Our church was everything to us. Potlucks every Sunday, youth group on Wednesdays, choir practice where my mama taught me all the old hymns." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "We didn't have much, but we had love. Community." Thomas leaned forward slightly, his usual businesslike demeanor softened by genuine concern. "When I was 19, this woman came to speak at our career day. She talked about opportunities in Chicago, jobs in hospitality, housing included, career training." Amanda's voice grew distant. It sounded like a miracle. "Mama had just lost her job, and my little sister needed braces." She paused, taking a careful sip of tea. "The first red flag was when they took my phone at the training facility. Said it was policy during orientation. Then they took my ID, my credit cards. Said they'd keep them safe." Her hands tightened around the mug. "By the time I realized what was happening, I was trapped." Thomas's jaw clenched, but he remained silent, giving her space to continue. "They moved us around a lot. Hotels, private homes, sometimes worse places." Amanda's voice remained steady, though her eyes grew distant. "There were other girls, so many of them, some barely 16. I was one of the older ones, so I tried to look after them. Braided their hair, taught them hymns, anything to keep hope alive." She drew a shaky breath. "There was this girl, Sarah, reminded me so much of my sister. When Maria, another woman who'd been there longer, started planning an escape, Sarah and I were supposed to go too. But the night we tried..." Amanda's voice finally broke. "Only Maria and I made it out. I still don't know what happened to Sarah. To any of them." Thomas reached across the table, hesitating before gently touching her hand. The gesture, though awkward, carried genuine compassion. "I was already pregnant by then," Amanda continued after a moment. "Maria got me to a shelter. But the stress, the trauma... I went into labor early. They told me..." Her voice caught. They said my baby didn't make it. I believed them because, why wouldn't I? But Maria, she never stopped looking. Even after she helped me get back on my feet, get my GED, she kept digging. How did she find out about Ava? Thomas asked quietly. Social media. Your divorce made headlines, and there was this picture of you with Ava at some tech conference. Maria recognized her immediately. She has my mother's eyes, my smile. She showed me the adoption date. It matched perfectly. Thomas ran a hand over his face, looking suddenly aged. I never questioned it. Grace handled everything through a private agency, said it was better that way, more discreet. I just signed the papers. You had no way of knowing, Amanda said gently. I should have known. The cost alone should have raised red flags. And Grace, she was so insistent on handling it all herself. He stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen. I was too focused on the company, on the next acquisition. I didn't want to look too closely at anything that might slow things down. Their conversation paused as Miles entered, carrying a thick folder. Mr. Ward, I have those documents you requested. He placed the folder on the table, nodding respectfully to Amanda before stepping back. Thomas opened the folder, scanning the contents. His face grew increasingly grim. DNA results, birth records, hospital documents, clearly falsified now that I'm actually looking at them. He looked up at Amanda. Everything matches your story. Everything. Amanda closed her eyes briefly, relief and pain mingling on her face. I never stopped loving her. Even when I thought she was gone, I loved her every single day. From upstairs came the sound of Ava waking, her cheerful babbling carrying through the baby monitor. Amanda wiped her eyes, composing herself with practiced grace. I'll get her, Thomas said suddenly. Take whatever time you need. The day passed in a blur of quiet activity. Thomas cancelled his meetings, working from home again. Amanda spent the morning with Ava in the garden, their laughter drifting through the open windows as they chased butterflies and picked dandelions. As evening approached, Thomas found himself in the kitchen, surprising Mrs. Chen by asking to help with dinner preparations. I'd like to set the table, he said, for all of us. The dining room looked different with 3 places set. Ava's booster seat between Thomas and Amanda. It felt right, somehow. Natural. Thank you for including me, Amanda said softly as they settled into their seats. This is your place too, Thomas replied, surprising himself with how much he meant it. Dinner was simple. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans that Ava actually ate when Amanda pretended they were tiny trees for her dolls to climb. The conversation flowed easier than Thomas expected, touching on safer topics, Ava's current favorite books, Amanda's talent for baking, the garden she hoped to plant someday. After dinner, they gathered in the family room for Ava's bedtime story. Amanda sat in the oversized armchair, Ava curled trustingly in her lap as she read Good Night Moon, with different voices for each page. Thomas watched from his usual spot by the fireplace, struck by how peaceful everything felt. Halfway through the second reading, Ava's eyes began to droop. By the 3rd page, she was sound asleep, one hand curled in Amanda's sweater, the other clutching her stuffed elephant. Amanda continued reading in a whisper, her fingers gently stroking Ava's curls. The sight stirred something profound in Thomas's chest. Not just the tender scene before him, but the quiet strength of the woman who had endured so much, yet still had such capacity for love. The last rays of sunset painted the room in soft gold as Amanda finished the story, though Ava was long asleep. The peaceful silence that followed felt like a prayer, like grace, like healing beginning to take root in all their wounded places. The morning dawned bright and crisp, sunlight streaming through the mansion's tall windows. Thomas sat in his home office, reviewing security reports while occasionally glancing at the baby monitor, where he could hear Amanda singing to Ava during their morning routine. The peaceful moment shattered when Mrs. Chen knocked urgently at his door. "Mr. Ward, Mrs. Ward, I mean, Ms. Grace is here. She's quite insistent about seeing you." Thomas's jaw tightened. "Where is she?" "In the front parlor, sir. She walked right past me, before I could stop her." Making his way downstairs, Thomas heard Grace's voice before he saw her. Sharp, demanding, with that edge of hysteria he remembered from their final months together. "I need to speak with Thomas immediately," Grace was saying to Miles, who stood firmly blocking her path to the main staircase. She wore an expensive cream-colored suit that screamed of careful image management, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. "Grace," Thomas said coldly. "What are you doing here?" She spun toward him, relief flashing across her face. "Thomas, thank God. We need to talk, privately." At that moment, Amanda appeared at the top of the stairs with Ava in her arms. The toddler was wearing her favorite purple dinosaur pajamas, curls still mussed from sleep. Grace's face went stark white. "Who is that?" she demanded, though something in her expression suggested she already knew. "Why is she holding my daughter?" "Your daughter?" Amanda's voice was quiet but clear, her arms tightening protectively around Ava. "You mean the baby you bought through illegal channels? I don't know what you're talking about." Grace's voice shook. "Thomas, who is this woman?" "This is Amanda Brooks," Thomas said firmly. "Ava's biological mother." Grace swayed slightly, grabbing the banister for support. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I did what I had to do. My office. Now." Thomas's voice left no room for argument. He glanced at Amanda, who gave him a small nod of understanding before carrying Ava towards the kitchen. Once inside his office, Grace paced like a caged animal while Thomas closed the door. "Explain," he demanded. "Everything." "Our marriage was falling apart," Grace began, words tumbling out. "You were always working, barely home. When we started the adoption process, it was taking forever. The waiting lists, the home studies, the bureaucracy. I was watching my chance at motherhood slip away. So you went outside the system." Thomas's voice was dangerously quiet. Grace's chin lifted defensively. "I found someone who could help. A broker who specialized in private adoptions. She promised everything would be legal, just expedited. For an astronomical fee," Thomas added, "which you insisted on handling yourself." "I didn't know." Grace's composure cracked. "I mean, I suspected something wasn't quite right, but I convinced myself it was fine. The paperwork looked legitimate. The story about the mother wanting a closed adoption seemed reasonable." "The mother," Thomas growled, "was a trafficking victim who thought her baby had died. Do you have any idea what you've done? The trauma you've caused?" "I was desperate," Grace cried. "Our marriage was crumbling. I thought a baby would fix everything. Would make you stay home, make you love me again." Thomas stared at her, truly seeing for the first time the depth of her self-absorption. "You used an innocent child as a band-aid for our failing marriage. You participated in human trafficking, Grace. There's no justifying that." "I didn't know it was trafficking," she protested weakly. "You didn't want to know," he corrected. "Just like you didn't want to know where the broker got her babies, or why everything had to be cash transactions, or why we couldn't meet the birth mother." Grace sank into a chair, mascara tracking down her cheeks. "What are you going to do?" "My lawyers are already working with the FBI. The broker you used is part of a larger investigation into the Silver Chain Syndicate." Thomas's voice was cold. "You'll need to cooperate fully." Unknown to them, Amanda had passed by the office door at that moment, Ava on her hip. She caught fragments of their conversation, enough to piece together the story of her daughter's journey from her arms to this house. Instead of lingering, she quietly continued down the hall, choosing to give them privacy for this painful reckoning. Hours later, after Grace had left and the house had settled into an uneasy quiet, Thomas found Amanda in the garden. Ava was already in bed, and Amanda sat on a stone bench, looking up at the stars. "I owe you an apology," Thomas said, sitting beside her, "for Grace's actions, for my blindness, for all of it." Amanda was quiet for a long moment. "I forgive her," she said finally. Thomas turned to her, startled. "How can you possibly forgive what she did?" "Not for her sake," Amanda explained softly. "For mine. Holding on to anger would only poison my own heart, and Ava needs me whole." She touched the simple cross necklace she always wore. "Besides, her actions, however wrong, led me here, led me back to my daughter." Thomas sat in stunned silence, humbled by her capacity for grace. The moonlight silvered Amanda's profile as she continued gazing at the stars, and something stirred in his chest. An unfamiliar warmth he wasn't ready to name. After a while, Amanda stood. "I need some fresh air. I think I'll walk around the garden for a bit." Thomas watched from the window as she made her way along the illuminated path, her arms wrapped around herself in the cool evening air. The sight of her, so strong yet so gentle, so wounded yet so gracious, awoke feelings he had long thought dormant. He pressed his hand against the cool glass, fighting the urge to join her, to comfort her, to... He turned away abruptly, refusing to complete the thought. Some things were better left unnamed, at least for now. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as Thomas watched Amanda prepare Ava's breakfast. The morning light caught the soft curls framing her face, and he found himself struck by the peaceful domesticity of the scene. After a sleepless night wrestling with his thoughts, he had come to a decision that both terrified and excited him. "Amanda," he said, clearing his throat, "could we talk for a moment?" She turned from where she was cutting fresh strawberries into tiny pieces for Ava. "Of course." Thomas gestured to the breakfast nook, and they sat down, Ava contentedly playing with her stuffed bunny in her high chair. "I've been thinking," he began, then paused, choosing his words carefully. "These past few days, watching you with Ava, it's clear how much she needs you, and not just for safety from the syndicate." Amanda's hands clasped tightly in her lap, but her expression remained carefully neutral. "I'd like you to stay," Thomas continued, "not temporarily, but as a permanent part of Ava's life. We can figure out the details, living arrangements, everything, but she deserves to have her mother in her life." Tears welled in Amanda's eyes, but she blinked them back. "Are you sure? This isn't just about safety anymore." "I'm sure," Thomas said firmly. "I've seen how she lights up around you, how naturally you understand her needs. She's happier than I've ever seen her." Amanda looked over at Ava, who was now attempting to share her strawberries with her stuffed bunny. "I want to stay more than anything," she admitted softly. "But I need to be honest. I'm scared, not just of the syndicate, but of letting myself believe this could be real, that I could actually have this life with her." Thomas reached across the table, surprising himself by covering her hand with his own. "It's real. We'll make it real." The morning unfolded into a new routine. After breakfast, they took Ava to the garden for playtime. Amanda showed Thomas how to make daisy chains, something she'd learned from her grandmother. Ava toddled between them, collecting flowers with serious concentration. "Like this," Amanda demonstrated, her fingers deftly splitting the stems. "My grandmother used to say every flower chain was a prayer made visible." Thomas fumbled with the delicate stems, but found himself enjoying the simple activity. My childhood wasn't exactly filled with flower chains. He admitted. It was all schedules and achievements. It's never too late to learn new ways of being, Amanda said gently, placing a completed daisy crown on Ava's head. The toddler beamed, touching the flowers with wonder. Lunchtime brought another shared meal, and Thomas found himself lingering at the table instead of rushing back to his home office. Amanda had made simple sandwiches, but the act of eating together felt profound. Ava insisted on feeding herself, making a glorious mess but grinning with pride. "You're doing so well, sweet girl," Amanda encouraged, wiping strawberry jam from Ava's chin. "Such a big girl." That afternoon, while Ava napped, Thomas and Amanda sat in the living room, planning how to make this arrangement work. They discussed converting the guest suite into Amanda's permanent space, ensuring she had her own private area while remaining close to Ava. "I want you to feel at home here," Thomas insisted, "not like a guest or an employee." Amanda nodded, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you. That means more than I can say." After Ava woke, they spent the afternoon in the playroom. Amanda introduced Thomas to the games and songs that seemed to come so naturally to her. When Ava became fussy before dinner, Amanda began singing a soft lullaby. "Hush now, my darling. Be still now and rest. Angels are watching, keeping you blessed." To Thomas's surprise, he found himself humming along, the simple melody awakening something long dormant in his soul. Ava's eyes lit up at hearing her father join in, and she clapped her tiny hands in delight. "Again!" she demanded. "Again, Papa!" Amanda caught Thomas's eye and smiled encouragingly. Together, they sang the lullaby once more, their voices blending in the quiet room. Thomas felt something in his chest loosen, as if a wall he hadn't known existed was gently crumbling. During dinner preparation, Amanda taught him the full lyrics while Ava played with her blocks nearby. "My mother used to sing this to me," she shared. "It always made me feel safe, no matter what was happening." Thomas watched her stir the pasta sauce, noting how she seemed more relaxed than he'd seen her yet. "You make this place feel like a home," he said quietly. "I didn't even realize how empty it was before." Just then, Ava looked up from her blocks and said clearly, "Home." They both froze, staring at her. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Amanda asked, kneeling down beside her. "Home," Ava repeated firmly, hugging her stuffed bunny. Amanda's eyes filled with tears as she gathered Ava into her arms. Thomas joined them on the floor, his heart full to bursting. "Yes, baby girl," he whispered. "This is home." That evening, they sat down to dinner together, the table set with simple plates and fresh flowers from their morning garden adventure. Ava sat between them in her high chair, babbling happily and occasionally repeating her new word. Amanda had prepared a simple meal of pasta and salad, but to Thomas it felt like the most satisfying dinner he'd had in years. The soft glow of the setting sun filled the dining room with warm light as they ate together, sharing small stories and gentle laughter. Ava managed to get more sauce on her face than in her mouth, but her joy was infectious. Thomas watched Amanda wipe Ava's hands and face with infinite patience, singing snippets of their lullaby when Ava started to fuss. In that moment, surrounded by the peaceful sounds of family dinner, Thomas felt truly content for the first time in as long as he could remember. The simple act of sharing a meal with these two people had somehow transformed his massive house into something warmer, something alive with possibility. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 2 a.m. when Thomas jerked awake, his heart racing from a nightmare he couldn't quite remember. Something felt wrong. The mansion's silence seemed too heavy, too complete. He reached for his phone, squinting at the bright screen. No messages, but the unease wouldn't leave him. Thomas swung his legs out of bed and pulled on his robe, deciding to check on Ava. The plush carpet muffled his footsteps as he moved down the darkened hallway. Moonlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the walls. He paused at the guest room where Amanda stayed, just across from Ava's nursery. The door was slightly ajar. "Amanda?" he whispered, pushing it open. The bed was empty, covers thrown back as if she'd left in a hurry. Her phone lay on the nightstand, its screen dark. Thomas's chest tightened. Amanda never went anywhere without her phone. She needed it to feel safe. He hurried to Ava's room next door. The toddler slept peacefully in her crib, one arm wrapped around her stuffed bunny. But no Amanda in the rocking chair where she often sat during Ava's restless nights. Thomas's phone buzzed. "Miles." "Sir." His head of security's voice was tense. "We have a breach in the outer fence, Sector 4. Motion sensors were triggered 3 minutes ago." Ice spread through Thomas's veins. "Amanda's missing from her room." "Lock yourself in with Miss Ava. I'm activating full security protocols now." Thomas scooped up his sleeping daughter, careful not to wake her, and retreated to the nursery's attached bathroom, reinforced with bulletproof walls and a heavy steel door. He settled into the cushioned corner with Ava against his chest, one hand hovering over the panic button that would seal the entire wing. His phone chimed with an encrypted message notification. With trembling fingers, he opened it. The words blazed against the dark screen. "She belongs to us. The child does too." "No," Thomas whispered fiercely. "No, no, no." He pressed the intercom, connecting to Miles. "They have her. The Silver Chain Syndicate. They've taken Amanda." Security footage shows 3 figures scaling the east wall. Miles reported grimly. They knew exactly where the blind spots were. This was planned. "Find her," Thomas ordered, his voice raw. "Whatever it takes." Keeping Ava secure in one arm, he used his phone to access the house's security feeds. Every camera showed empty corridors, undisturbed rooms. But when he reached the kitchen feed, his breath caught. A cabinet door stood open, the one where Amanda kept her favorite tea. On the counter sat an abandoned mug, steam still rising. They had taken her when she went to make tea. Such a simple, ordinary moment turned horrific. "Miles' kitchen footage 20 minutes ago." The security chief accessed it remotely. "I see it. Checking exterior cameras for that time frame now." Thomas held Ava closer as she stirred slightly in her sleep. Her small face looked so much like Amanda's. The same gentle curve of cheek, the same long eyelashes. When had he memorized Amanda's features so completely? When had her presence become as essential as air? "Sir." Miles's voice was heavy. "They disabled the cameras along the east perimeter before the breach. We're blind there. Local police have been notified, but the Silver Chain Syndicate was beyond local law enforcement. They all knew it." Dawn began to paint the sky in pale greys and pinks. Thomas stood at the nursery window, Ava still sleeping against his shoulder, and watched the light creep across his vast estate. Somewhere out there, Amanda was being taken further away with each passing moment. Amanda who sang lullabies and made flower crowns, who forgave so easily and loved so completely, who had begun to show him what family truly meant. The morning sun finally crested the horizon, flooding the room with gold. Thomas pressed his lips to Ava's curls, breathing in her baby-sweet scent, mixed with the lingering trace of Amanda's lavender lotion from their bedtime routine. "I will find your mama," he whispered to his sleeping daughter. "I promise you both." His chest ached with emotions he could no longer deny. In just days, Amanda had woven herself into the fabric of their lives, healing wounds he hadn't even known were there. Her gentle strength and unwavering faith had begun to transform not just his home, but his heart. Now, watching the new day dawn with his daughter in his arms and Amanda's absence like a physical pain, Thomas made a silent vow. He would not lose her, not the woman who had brought light back into their lives, not the mother who had survived hell to find her child, not Amanda, who had somehow become essential to his own survival. The sun rose fully, painting the world in deceptively peaceful hues. But Thomas stood vigil, his jaw set and his heart hardening with determination. They would find her. They had to, because in just a few short days, Amanda Brooks had become family, and Thomas Ward protected his family at all costs. The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when Thomas's home office transformed into a command center. Dozens of screens flickered with data, maps, and surveillance footage. The normally pristine space now housed a revolving door of specialists, each summoned by urgent calls and promises of whatever payment they required. "I want every traffic camera within 50 miles checked," Thomas ordered, his voice hoarse from hours of giving directions. He hadn't slept since discovering Amanda's absence. "Cross-reference any vehicle movements between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock this morning." A cybersecurity expert, a young woman with quick eyes and faster fingers, nodded without looking up from her laptop. "Already scanning, Mr. Ward. We've identified 3 potential vehicles that left the area during that window." Across the room, Miles coordinated with former military contacts, his phone seemingly glued to his ear. "The plate numbers are being run now. Yes, through both official and unofficial channels." Thomas pressed his palms against his desk, trying to steady himself. The coffee in his cup had long gone cold, untouched. He couldn't drink it. The scent reminded him too much of peaceful mornings with Amanda, watching her add honey to her tea, while Ava babbled in her high chair. A private investigator approached, tablet in hand. "Sir, we've compiled profiles on known silver chain operatives in the region. Their pattern suggests they maintain safe houses within 4 hours of major cities." "Map them all," Thomas commanded. "I want satellite imagery of every location, current and historical." The investigator hesitated. "Mr. Ward, you should know. These people, they're extremely dangerous. They've managed to stay ahead of federal authorities for years." Thomas's eyes hardened. "They have Amanda. I don't care how dangerous they are." The morning stretched into afternoon. Thomas moved between screens and reports, analyzing every detail. His tech background proved useful. He spotted patterns in data others might miss. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't fast enough. At 3 o'clock, Ava's nanny brought her to the office door. "She's been asking for her mama," the nanny said softly. Thomas's heart clenched. He walked over and lifted Ava into his arms, breathing in her sweet baby scent. "Hey, princess," he whispered. "Mama sing?" Ava asked, her big brown eyes, so like Amanda's, looking around hopefully. "Mama will sing to you soon," Thomas promised, his voice thick. "Very soon." He carried Ava to her nursery, needing a moment away from the frantic activity downstairs. The room still held traces of Amanda's presence, a hair tie on the changing table, a cardigan draped over the rocking chair, a children's Bible on the nightstand. Thomas sat in the rocker, holding Ava close. She curled against his chest, thumb in her mouth, a habit Amanda had been gently trying to break by offering substitute comfort objects. Even in that small detail, Amanda's loving wisdom showed through. "Your mama taught me so much," Thomas murmured to Ava. "About patience, about joy, about what really matters." He thought about how Amanda always paused to really listen when Ava spoke, no matter how busy she was. How she found delight in small things. Butterflies in the garden, the way sunlight caught in Ava's curls. How she lived her faith not through grand gestures, but in quiet, constant kindness. The lullaby Amanda sang every night floated through his memory, He found himself humming it softly, the simple melody carrying more meaning than he'd ever imagined possible. It was more than just a song, it was Amanda's love made audible. "Lord, keep us together," he whispered, echoing the prayer he'd heard Amanda speak so many times. The words felt foreign on his tongue. He hadn't prayed since childhood. But now they seemed like the most natural thing in the world. Eva drifted to sleep in his arms, one tiny hand clutching his shirt. Thomas held her, watching the afternoon light shift across the nursery floor. How had Amanda changed them so completely in such a short time? She'd walked into their lives and suddenly everything was different. Warmer, fuller, more alive. His phone vibrated. Miles. "Sir." His head of security's voice was urgent. "We've got something. The vehicle that left your estate headed north on Route 37. We've tracked it to a warehouse district that matches known silver chain operations patterns." Thomas stood carefully, laying Eva in her crib. "How certain are we?" "The route aligns with 3 previous silver chain incidents, and the warehouse was purchased 6 months ago through the same shell company structure they've used before. Have the team ready in 20 minutes. Thomas ordered. "We're going." "Sir." Miles hesitated. "This should be handled by—" "I'm going, Miles." Thomas's voice left no room for argument. "They took my family." The words surprised him even as he spoke them. But they were true. Somewhere between Amanda's first gentle touch with Eva and her last quiet smile at dinner, she had become family. Her absence left a hole he couldn't ignore. Thomas leaned down and pressed a kiss to Ava's forehead. "I'm bringing your mama home," he whispered. "I promise." He straightened, squaring his shoulders. In his pocket he could feel the small silver cross Amanda had left behind. Dropped during the struggle perhaps, or torn from her neck. He wrapped his fingers around it, drawing strength from its simple presence. Outside the nursery window, the sun was beginning to set. Somewhere out there, Amanda was waiting. Amanda who had taught him how to love again, who had shown him what family truly meant, who had filled his home with song and his heart with hope. "Hold on," he whispered into the gathering dusk. "We're coming." The black SUVs rolled out at 5 o'clock in the morning, cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. Thomas sat in the lead vehicle, his fingers wrapped around Amanda's silver cross. The tactical team, 6 highly trained operatives plus Miles, rode in perfect silence, checking equipment with practiced movements. Thomas watched the sunrise paint the sky in soft pinks and golds, so different from the harsh fluorescent light of his usual morning meetings. Had it really been only 2 weeks since Amanda first appeared in his home? The memory surfaced with startling clarity. Her gentle humming, the tender way she held Ava, that first moment their eyes met. 2 hours to target. Miles said quietly from the driver's seat. Thomas nodded, his mind drifting through the catalogue of moments he'd stored away. Amanda teaching Ava to blow kisses, the way she always touched Ava's curls when she passed by, as if reassuring herself her daughter was real. Her soft voice singing hymns in the kitchen while making breakfast. He remembered the morning she'd explained how she marked Bible verses that gave her strength. "Not because they're magic words," she'd said, "but because they remind me I'm never alone." Her faith wasn't showy or preachy. It was as natural as breathing, woven into every aspect of her life. The highway stretched endlessly ahead. Thomas thought about the evening they'd spent in the garden, watching Ava chase butterflies. Amanda had laughed, really laughed, for the first time since arriving. The sound had transformed her entire face, erasing the shadows of fear for just a moment. He'd found himself laughing too, infected by her joy. "You're good with her," Amanda had said later that night, after putting Ava to bed. "She feels safe with you." "I'm learning," he'd replied. "From you. Now, Racing toward uncertainty, Thomas realized how much he'd learned from Amanda. Patience, forgiveness, the strength found in gentleness. She'd shown him a different kind of power than the corporate force he wielded daily. Miles's voice cut through his thoughts. "Sir, preliminary surveillance confirms movement inside the warehouse. At least 8 hostiles identified." Thomas straightened, pushing memories aside. "Show me." Inside the warehouse, Amanda knelt on the cold concrete floor. Her wrists were bound behind her, the rope cutting into her skin, but her head was held high. "The Lord is my shepherd," she whispered, drawing strength from the familiar words. "I shall not want." The warehouse was vast, filled with shipping containers and industrial equipment. Amanda had caught glimpses of medical supplies being moved, evidence of the syndicate's dark trade. But her thoughts remained fixed on Ava, safe in her bed miles away. "Please protect her, Lord," Amanda prayed. "Keep her safe. And Thomas." She paused, surprised by the way her heart squeezed at his name. "Guide him. Give him wisdom." A door clanged somewhere in the building. Amanda tensed, but continued her silent prayers. She thought of Thomas's face when he watched Ava play, the way tenderness softened his stern features. She remembered how he'd started humming along with her lullabies, probably without even realizing it. The sun climbed higher, sending shafts of dusty light through high windows. Amanda tracked its progress, marking time. She thought of mornings in Thomas's kitchen, Ava in her high chair, Thomas pretending to read reports while secretly watching them both. The way his home had begun to feel like somewhere she belonged. "Your mother's stubbornness is impressive." A cold voice interrupted her thoughts. Amanda recognized Jensen, one of the syndicate's leaders. "But it won't matter soon. The child will be ours again." Amanda met his eyes steadily. "She was never yours. She's a child of God." Jensen laughed harshly. "Still clinging to faith after everything." "Especially after everything," Amanda replied quietly. Miles's team arrived at the warehouse district as evening approached. They parked the vehicles in a concealed location, setting up surveillance equipment with swift efficiency. Thomas studied the thermal imaging displays, his heart racing when he spotted a solitary figure in a chair. "Amanda. Entry points identified." Miles reported. "We have clear shots at the east and west doors. Minimal security visible, but likely armed. We'll move at nightfall." "I'm going in with you," Thomas said. Miles frowned. "Sir, with all due respect, this isn't a discussion." Thomas checked the tactical vest they'd given him. "She's in there because of me. Because I failed to protect her." "Boss," Miles said quietly, "she's in there because evil people do evil things. But we're going to get her out." Thomas nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. The sun was setting now, painting the warehouse in deep shadows. He thought of Amanda's prayers, how she always seemed to find peace even in darkness. The tactical team moved into position. Thomas could feel the weight of the vest, the unfamiliar pressure of the earpiece. His heart thundered in his chest as he waited for Miles's signal. In the gathering darkness, Thomas closed his eyes. Amanda's quiet voice echoed in his memory. "Lord, keep us together. Please," he whispered, clutching her silver cross. "Keep us together." The signal came. Thomas took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to face whatever waited in the shadows. The warehouse erupted in chaos at exactly 8:15 in the evening. Flashbangs exploded in brilliant bursts, followed by the crash of doors being breached simultaneously from multiple entry points. Shouts echoed through the cavernous space as the tactical team stormed in, their movements precise and coordinated. Thomas followed close behind Miles, his heart pounding so hard he could barely hear the commands being barked through his earpiece. The smell of metal and dust filled his nostrils as they moved swiftly through the dimly lit space. Ahead, he could hear panicked voices and running footsteps as the traffickers realized they were under attack. "They're moving her!" Someone shouted from deeper in the building. "Loading dock, east side!" Thomas's blood ran cold. They were trying to take Amanda away. Without thinking, he broke formation, ignoring Miles's sharp warning. He ran toward the eastern corridor, guided by instinct and desperate prayer. The tactical vest felt heavy on his chest, but adrenaline pushed him forward. Through the chaos, he caught glimpses of figures fleeing, men in dark clothing disappearing into shadows, the sound of doors slamming. But Thomas had eyes only for the hallway ahead, where emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across concrete walls. Then he saw her. Amanda was being half-dragged by two men, her hands still bound. Even in the dim light, Thomas could see the determination in her face. She was fighting them every step, making their progress slow and clumsy. She hadn't given up. "Amanda!" The name tore from his throat. She looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. "Thomas?" One of the men cursed, reaching for something at his waist. But before he could draw his weapon, a member of the tactical team appeared behind him, taking him down with practiced efficiency. The second man released Amanda and tried to run, but was quickly subdued. Thomas reached her in 3 long strides, pulling out his tactical knife to cut through the ropes binding her wrists. The moment she was free, Amanda collapsed against him, her whole body trembling. "I knew," she whispered against his chest. "I knew you'd come." Thomas wrapped his arms around her, one hand cradling the back of her head. "Always," he said hoarsely. "I will always come for you." But they weren't safe yet. Miles's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Sir, we need to move, now." Thomas started guiding Amanda toward the exit, supporting her as she stumbled on unsteady legs. They were halfway down the corridor when running footsteps echoed behind them. Thomas turned to see a man charging toward them, gun raised. Everything seemed to slow down. Thomas tried to position himself between Amanda and the threat, but before he could move, a blur of motion crossed his vision. Miles appeared from a side passage, launching himself at the gunman with military precision. Both men went down in a tangle of limbs, the weapons skittering across the floor. "Go!" Miles shouted, pinning the attacker. "Get her out!" They ran. Thomas half-carried Amanda through the maze of corridors, following the exit signs that glowed faintly in the darkness. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of the operation being dismantled. Commands being shouted, zip ties being secured, rights being read. Finally, they burst through an emergency exit into the cool night air. The parking lot was filled with tactical vehicles and approaching police cars, their lights painting everything in rotating red and blue. But Thomas barely noticed any of it, because a familiar voice cut through all other sounds. "Mama!" Amanda's head snapped up. There, being carried by Sarah from Thomas's security team, was Ava. The little girl was reaching out with both arms, tears streaming down her face. "My baby," Amanda sobbed, stumbling forward. "Oh God, my baby." Sarah quickly brought Ava to them, and Amanda gathered her daughter into her arms, sinking to her knees on the asphalt. She rocked back and forth, crying and whispering prayers of thanksgiving while Ava clung to her neck, hiccuping with emotion. Thomas moved without thinking, positioning himself to shield them both from the chaos still spilling out of the warehouse. He placed one hand on Amanda's shoulder and the other on Ava's back, forming a protective circle around his family. The word rose in his mind without permission, but he didn't fight it. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as more units approached. The night was alive with activity as law enforcement swarmed the area. Thomas could hear radio chatter about other locations being raided simultaneously. The entire Silver Chain network was being torn apart at the roots. Miles appeared beside them, slightly disheveled but unharmed. "Area's secure," he reported quietly. "We got them all, including the leadership. They're done." Amanda looked up at this, tears still tracking down her cheeks. "Really done?" "Really done," Miles confirmed, allowing himself a small smile. "They won't hurt anyone else." Ava reached one small hand toward Thomas, and he caught it gently in his own. The three of them stayed connected like that, Amanda holding Ava, Thomas holding them both, while red and blue lights painted the night around them, and justice finally arrived in full force. The Silver Chain Syndicate's reign of terror was ending. But for Thomas, Amanda, and little Ava, something else was just beginning to bloom. Something much stronger than the darkness they'd faced. Something that felt a lot like hope. Police cars continued to arrive, their sirens filling the night with sound and light. But in their small circle on the ground, peace had already found its home. The drive back to the mansion felt surreal. Thomas sat in the back of the armored SUV with Amanda and Ava, who hadn't stopped clinging to each other since their reunion. Streetlights flashed across their faces as they wound through the quiet suburban streets, casting alternating patterns of light and shadow. Amanda looked exhausted but refused to sleep, as if afraid this might all disappear if she closed her eyes. Ava had finally dozed off in her lap, one tiny hand still gripping Amanda's shirt. Thomas watched them both, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. When they arrived at the mansion, medical teams were already waiting. Thomas had arranged for private healthcare professionals to be on standby, knowing Amanda would need immediate attention, but might be uncomfortable in a hospital setting. "I'm fine," Amanda protested weakly as Thomas helped her inside, still carrying Ava. "Please," he said softly. "Let them check you both. For my peace of mind, if nothing else." She relented, allowing the medical team to guide her to the living room where they had set up their equipment. Thomas pulled up a chair and sat beside them, his presence steady and unwavering. The doctors worked efficiently, checking Amanda's vital signs and examining the rope burns on her wrists. "You're dehydrated?" the lead physician said gently, "and showing signs of mild shock, but there's no serious physical trauma. We'll get you started on some fluids." As a nurse set up an IV, another doctor carefully examined the sleeping Ava, confirming she was perfectly healthy despite the stressful experience. Amanda held Thomas's gaze through her tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You saved my life." Thomas shook his head, reaching for her hand, the one without the IV. "No, Amanda, you saved mine first." He swallowed hard, struggling to find the right words. "Before you came here, I was empty, just going through the motions. You showed me what real strength looks like, what faith looks like. You restored my humanity." Amanda's eyes filled with fresh tears, but before she could respond, Ava stirred and whimpered in her sleep. Amanda immediately began humming their special lullaby, and Thomas found himself joining in quietly, their voices blending in the peaceful darkness of the room. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. Law enforcement officials came and went, conducting interviews and providing updates. The Silver Chain Syndicate was being dismantled piece by piece, with dozens of arrests across multiple states. Amanda's testimony would help ensure the organization never hurt another person again. Thomas arranged for additional security measures, more cameras, enhanced perimeter monitoring, and a dedicated team of protection specialists who maintained a constant presence around the mansion. He wasn't taking any chances, even though police assured them the threat had been neutralized. Life inside the mansion slowly began finding its new rhythm. Amanda moved from the guest room to a larger suite closer to Ava's nursery. The staff, who had grown to love her even in the short time she'd been there, welcomed her back with warm hugs and home-cooked meals. Thomas worked from home, unwilling to leave them even though he knew they were safe. He found himself seeking out their company throughout the day, joining them for lunch in the garden, sitting with them while Ava played with her toys, listening to Amanda read bedtime stories in her gentle voice. But something had shifted inside him, and Thomas struggled to make sense of these new feelings. He caught himself watching Amanda when she wasn't looking, noticing the way sunlight caught her hair, the sound of her laugh when Ava did something silly, the quiet grace with which she moved through their lives. Was she just grateful for his protection? Did she see him as nothing more than Ava's adoptive father, a necessary part of their daughter's life? The questions tormented him, but he kept them buried deep, afraid of disturbing the delicate peace they'd found. On the evening of the second day, Thomas stood in the doorway of Ava's nursery, watching Amanda rock their daughter to sleep. The room was bathed in the soft glow of a nightlight, and Amanda was singing that familiar lullaby, her voice sweet and low. He must have made some small sound because Amanda looked up and smiled, gesturing for him to come closer. Thomas moved quietly across the room, standing beside the rocking chair as Ava's breathing deepened into sleep. "She's so peaceful," Amanda whispered, "like the last few days never happened." "Children are resilient," Thomas replied softly, "especially when they're surrounded by love." Amanda carefully stood and placed Ava in her crib, tucking the blanket around her small form. They both stood there, watching their daughter sleep, and Thomas felt that familiar ache in his chest, the one that appeared whenever he saw them together. Without warning, Amanda's hand found his where it rested on the crib rail. Her touch was gentle, deliberate, her fingers sliding between his with natural ease. Thomas felt his breath catch in his throat, his heart hammering against his ribs. He turned his head slightly to look at her, finding her already watching him with those deep, honest eyes. The hope that bloomed in his chest was almost painful in its intensity. Amanda's hand tightened slightly around his, and in that quiet moment, surrounded by the soft sounds of their sleeping daughter, Thomas realized that some questions don't need to be asked out loud to be answered. They stood there together, hands entwined, watching over the precious life they both loved more than anything in the world. And in the peaceful silence of the nursery, that simple touch said everything that words couldn't. The early morning sunlight painted golden streaks across the mansion's manicured lawn as autumn settled firmly into the landscape. 2 weeks had passed since the rescue, bringing with them a flurry of legal proceedings, police interviews, and life-changing decisions. Thomas stood at his office window, reviewing the final documents that had arrived that morning. The papers confirmed what they had all hoped for. Amanda was now legally recognized as Ava's biological mother, with full protective status granted by the courts. The trafficking investigation had provided irrefutable evidence of her claims, and the justice system had moved swiftly to right the wrongs of the past. He watched as Amanda pushed Ava on the garden swing, their laughter carrying through the glass. His daughter wore a tiny purple sweater against the morning chill, her dark curls bouncing with each gentle push. Amanda sang softly, the same sweet lullaby that had become the soundtrack of their shared lives. Thomas straightened his collar and took a deep breath. The past 2 weeks had given him clarity he never expected. Every morning he woke hoping to hear Amanda's voice. Every meal felt incomplete without her presence, and every night he found himself lingering in doorways just to watch her with Ava. The empty spaces in his life that he'd tried so hard to fill with work and success now had names: Amanda and Ava. He stepped out onto the garden path, autumn leaves crunching beneath his feet. Amanda looked up at his approach, her smile warming him more than the morning sun. "Good morning." she called softly, still pushing Ava, who squealed with delight at each forward swing. "Good morning," Thomas replied, his voice gentle. "Would you like to take a walk with me? The gardens are beautiful this time of year." Amanda nodded, helping Ava down from the swing. "Sophie," she called to one of the staff members nearby, "would you mind watching Ava for a few minutes?" Sophie hurried over, already reaching for Ava's hand. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's go find some pretty leaves for your collection." Thomas and Amanda fell into step together along the winding garden path. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn flowers and fallen leaves. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached the rose garden, where Thomas had asked the gardeners to maintain a bench surrounded by late-blooming flowers. "The papers came through this morning," Thomas said, turning to face her. "Everything's official now. You're legally recognized as Ava's mother, and the protective status ensures you'll both be safe." Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "I still can't believe it's real. Sometimes I wake up thinking it was all a dream." "It's very real," Thomas assured her, taking her hands in his. They were warm, despite the cool morning air. "Amanda, these past weeks, they've changed everything for me." She looked up at him, her expression open and vulnerable. "For me, too." "When you were taken," Thomas continued, his voice rough with emotion, "I realized something. My life before you came here was empty. I thought I had everything figured out, success, status, a perfectly ordered world. But I was wrong. You showed me what really matters." Amanda's hands trembled in his. "Thomas, you brought light into our home. Not just for Ava, but for me too. Your strength, your faith, your capacity for love even after everything you've been through. It humbles me. And He paused, gathering his courage. "I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Tears spilled down Amanda's cheeks. "I never thought I could have this," she whispered. "After everything that happened, I believed I didn't deserve joy or love or family. I was just trying to survive." Thomas reached up to wipe away her tears with gentle fingers. "You deserve everything, Amanda. Joy, safety, love, all of it. You deserve a home where you never have to be afraid again. You deserve to watch our daughter grow up surrounded by love and peace." "Our daughter?" Amanda's voice wavered. "Yes," Thomas said firmly. "Ours. Amanda, I want to build a home with you and Ava. Not because of obligation or circumstance, but because I've fallen in love with your beautiful soul, because you make me want to be better, to love deeper, to have faith in things I can't see." Amanda stepped closer, her eyes shining. "I never thought I could feel this way again. Safe, cherished, hopeful. You've given me back my daughter, my freedom, my future. But more than that, you've shown me that love doesn't have to hurt. That family can be gentle and kind." Thomas drew her into his arms, feeling her trembling against him. She fit perfectly there, as if she'd always belonged. Amanda's arms wrapped around his waist, her tears dampening his shirt, but her smile pressed against his chest told him they were happy tears. "We'll figure everything out together," he promised, holding her close. "One day at a time." They stood there in the morning light, surrounded by roses and autumn leaves, no longer bound by the fears that had shaped their past. In that embrace, they found something neither had dared to hope for: the promise of tomorrow, the safety of home, and the healing power of love freely given and received. Through the garden, they could hear Ava's delighted laughter as she played with Sophie, a sound that now held the promise of countless joyful mornings to come. Their little girl would grow up knowing only love, protected by the strength of their unity and wrapped in the warmth of their combined devotion. 3 months passed like a gentle stream, each day bringing new moments of joy and healing to the Ward estate. The morning of their foundation's first major fundraiser dawned clear and bright, with autumn sunlight streaming through the mansion's tall windows. Amanda stood before the mirror in her room, smoothing her navy blue dress with trembling hands. The note cards containing her speech sat on the dresser, though she had memorized every word. Each line spoke of hope rising from darkness, of healing found in unexpected places. Down the hall, she could hear Thomas's deep voice, mixing with Ava's giggles. "Hold still, Princess. Let Daddy fix this ribbon." Amanda smiled, remembering how different things had been just months ago. Now their days flowed with a peaceful rhythm. Morning prayers, shared meals, evening walks in the garden. The foundation work filled their afternoons, giving purpose to their pain and hope to others trapped in darkness. She found Thomas in Ava's room, kneeling before their daughter. His usually stern expression had softened into pure adoration as he adjusted the white satin ribbon in Ava's hair. The little girl's dress matched the ribbon, making her look like a tiny angel. "Mama!" Ava called out, twirling to show off her outfit. "Pretty. So pretty," Amanda agreed, bending to kiss her daughter's forehead. "Just like you." Thomas stood, his eyes warm as he took in Amanda's appearance. "You look beautiful," he said softly. "Are you ready for today?" "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, touching the silver cross at her neck, a gift from Thomas when they launched the foundation. The mansion gradually filled with guests throughout the morning, business leaders, survivors' advocates, law enforcement officials, and community members. The great room hummed with conversation as Amanda prepared to share her story. When she stepped up to the podium, Thomas stood nearby with Ava in his arms, their presence giving her strength. Amanda's voice carried clear and strong as she spoke of her journey from captivity to freedom, from despair to hope, from loss to love. 3 years ago, I thought I had lost everything, she said, meeting the eyes of her audience. But God had other plans. He led me to my daughter and to a man whose heart was big enough to embrace us both. Now we want to help others find their way home too. Throughout the event, guests approached to share their support. Many were moved to tears by Amanda's courage and Thomas's humility in using his resources to protect others. Ava charmed everyone she met, her innocent joy a reminder of why their work mattered. As the sun began to set, the last guests departed, leaving behind promises of support and partnership. The foundation's launch had exceeded their hopes, opening doors for more survivors to find healing and safety. Thomas, Amanda, and Ava settled onto the back porch, watching the first fireflies of evening dance across the lawn. Ava squealed with delight, chasing the tiny lights while staying within her parents' sight. "Careful, sweetheart," Amanda called out, smiling as their daughter giggled and jumped. Thomas wrapped his arm around Amanda's shoulders, drawing her close. "Do you remember that first morning?" he asked quietly. "When I found you in the nursery?" Amanda nodded, leaning into his embrace. "I was so scared, but I knew I had to stay. Ava needed me." "I needed you too," Thomas admitted. "I just didn't know it yet. That was the day God began rebuilding my life piece by piece, through you, through Ava, through this work we're doing together." They watched as Ava tired herself out chasing fireflies, her white dress glowing in the twilight. She toddled back to them, climbing into Amanda's lap with a contented sigh. Amanda pressed her face into Ava's curls, breathing in the sweet scent of her daughter. "We're finally home," she whispered, resting her head on Thomas's shoulder. The three of them sat together in the growing darkness, their little family wrapped in perfect peace. The fireflies continued their dance, like stars come down to earth, while crickets sang their evening song. Here, in this moment, they were anchored by love, strengthened by faith, and blessed with a future full of purpose. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.